Hi everyone, welcome to our weekly webinar. This week we're talking about applying for grants and utilizing ambassadors in crisis. This is a webinar dedicated to charities. Welcome. My name is Andreea Deveau. I'm the co-founder and VP of Communications for KindLink. Joining me today will be Deanna Wolf, Senior Consultant Trust Fundraising at Money Tree Fundraising. And a little bit later, Rita Chadha, CEO of the Small Charities Coalition. Before I go to my first guest, let me give you a quick overview of KindLink. We are a technology platform supporting companies with all their CSR needs, from volunteering and fundraising to impact and sustainability goals measurement, all in one place. We offer the platform for free to nonprofits for them to manage their activity, fundraise, engage with potential supporters, and increase their general transparency in the space. Last year, we donated some £6 million worth of software to our 1,500 charities that are on our platform and active in our ecosystem. During that same period, they fundraised about £1 million through our platform, and we saved them around £20,000 through our strategy of never taking a percentage of the funds raised through us. Because we're living in very strange times, we've created a special area in our opportunities marketplace to connect corporates with charities fighting the COVID-19 crisis. And we are seeing a lot of interest for companies and individuals looking to help. So if you're a charity looking for help in that space, please join our dedicated area, ask for support, and hopefully we'll be able to match you with the right people or the right corporates. I would also like to remind you that we have an option at the bottom of the screen for you to ask questions. Please do so, and when you do, introduce yourselves with your name and potentially your LinkedIn profile. Now I will go to our guest, Deanna. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, that would be great.
Hi, sorry, I'm just writing down a note so I don't forget later on. My name is Deanna Wolf, as Andrea said. I am a trust fundraiser. I've done a little bit of fundraising in all sorts of other areas, and I'm originally Canadian, but I've lived in the UK now since 2003 and have been doing trust fundraising at various levels throughout that time. Until about 2 years ago, I was the special interest chair or special interest group for trusts and foundations and statutory here in Scotland with the Institute of Fundraising. And I was the author and project leader of the project on the Commission on the Donor Experience for Trusts and Foundations. Right now, I'm a senior consultant with Money Tree Fundraising, and I specialize particularly in trust fundraising. For us, I manage all of our accounts and I do some trust fundraising still. I also do training on trust fundraising and how that works and how to do it as a best practice way. As far as I am concerned, and I think as far as a lot of other people are concerned, there's no one way to do trust fundraising. There's a bunch of ways to do it that work, and it will depend on the culture of your organization, but there's also a bunch of ways not to do it right. So that's kind of where I come from with this. So it's about 17, 18 years worth of trust fundraising experience.
Well, we'll definitely come back to the how-tos and how-not-tos a little bit later. Before we do that, can you give us a bit of an overview? I mean, obviously, we're living in unprecedented times. The global pandemic has essentially turned our world upside down. There's a lot of talk about funds out there to support charities. So my question is, can you give us an overview? What's going on in the market? Is there enough funding? Are charities getting this funding? Is it coming in quick enough? What's your take on what's going on right now?
My take right now is that it changes from moment to moment and day to day. There's an awful lot of charities, and I've just seen something this morning where it said over 500 charities are giving and trusts are giving funding towards COVID-19 projects and impacts. A lot of the funding is very, very specific, and it's very specific to particular geographic areas or particular types of funder or of charities that are looking for funding. And an awful lot of it is going for if you are dealing with frontline services or services and people who are impacted immediately and directly by the coronavirus. It's not necessarily at the moment dealing with charities that are impacted because they're having to furlough people or close down or loss of income. Although there are pockets of that, and I think that's a little bit more geographic, such as the London Funders Association has that, where it's to do with specific areas within London and how that's impacting those charities that are there. The other side of it is that there are people who have medical issues. They're going to be here, hopefully, when the pandemic has ramped down a little bit. So if you've got cancer or stroke and heart conditions or breathing issues that have nothing to do with coronavirus, those people are still going to be here. If you break your leg, you're still broken your leg, whether or not you've got coronavirus. So all of those conditions and all of those people are still going to be here regardless. They may, however, be in worse off condition. So there is some, if you can tie your resources and your approach into, we're dealing with people who are impacted because all of the efforts are going towards coronavirus and COVID-19 and dealing with that issue. And as a result, these people aren't getting treatment and don't have access to treatment. So we're supporting them, and it's taking more money and more support from us to do that. And we've lost 3 of our funding streams. We normally had an event this week, and last month we had a direct mail that was supposed to go out, and all that slipped away. So if you can show direct impact to your charities beneficiaries, then that is where things are. The money is going to come in when the money comes in, and as much as everyone wants the money right now, because right now is when you're hurting, you have to keep in mind that all the organizations that who are providing funding have also got staff at home who are isolating, have also got furloughed staff. And so whereas before they might have had 100 people processing checks, they might now have 25 people processing checks. So please, it's a matter of being patient and doing some planning and taking a step back and taking a really deep breath and looking at what can you put on hold realistically. I know a lot of charities are already doing that, but you've got to do it from a fundraising point of view too, and not panic. This isn't a situation where we need to panic, and we've not lost physical infrastructure. We've lost, and there's massive effect, and I'm not saying there isn't, but panicking is a way to make sure that you're not going to be able to get what you want to get. Trust fundraising is a long game anyways. And so the things that people were asking for right now, unless they were playing very tightly to the deadline Jeopardy game and submitting just before a deadline was happening, most of them they have to deliberate, and they might be getting thousands of applications in. So it will take 6 months potentially for some of that funding to come through. Some are being fast tracked, and I know some charities are getting funding out already. From what I hear on the buzz through Facebook, all the fundraising chat lines on Facebook and various other social media platforms, there is money coming out, and there is emergency money coming out. But you have to be prepared and understand that there's a limited number of people who are being able to process everything. So that's kind of where it's at for me.
So there's been a lot of announcements of funds available. The government announced, I think it was last week, about £750 million for charities. That sounds like a lot. There's a lot of buzz in the space. There's money coming in. But as a charity, where do you start? How do you find the right fit for you when it comes to applying for funding? Because you won't have unlimited resources to write applications, right? So how do you start that search?
I think there's 2 sides of it. You can't separate being prepared to write applications from doing the research for it. I think that can I just say some assumptions that I've made about your audience, and some assumptions about trust fundraising that are important, because that sets the context of in which trust fundraising is at. And even though there's a push to get applications in quickly for some of these funds, you have to take a measured step back and be prepared for them. Otherwise, you're going to be putting in information that may not be appropriate, or you might miss out something that's really, really important. So first of all, that trust fundraising, the trusts want to find out how your beneficiaries are being impacted. You're not as important to them as the beneficiaries are. You are a translator and you are a facilitator, but as an organization, the impact on your organization only matters in so much really as how that will impact your beneficiaries. If you run out of money and you're not there, what will the impact be on them? Not will the impact be on you? So if you can keep in mind that it's about them, not about us in this case, as opposed to normally our organizations and our societies it's about us, not them. You need to keep that in mind. The other thing is, as I said, trust fundraising is a long game. It's about developing relationships over time rather than developing them immediately. And it does have some crosses over with major donor giving, but still it's about relationships. And sometimes those relationships are just about making sure that you meet deadlines and you respond when they ask you a question. It's a detailed activity and there are reporting requirements. So don't apply for something that you're not going to have the capacity to deliver on, because you might have to give the money back, and that might have a greater impact on you than not having the money in the first place. The other thing is that don't do trust fundraising if you don't think that, and you can't justify that your project is a fundable project and is interesting to funders. If you're not sure, talk to people about it. See, are they interested in what you're doing? Or is it just that you are very passionate about what you're doing and other people don't share that passion? That needs to be there. You need to be responding right now to needs, not to wants. If you want something that's big, you want to build a new building, what is the need for that new building? If it's a pressing need, that's one thing. Those are the kinds of applications that you need to be sending out right away. If it's a need that's going to be coming and it's going to take time, you either need to make your timeline shorter, or longer rather, or you need to decide what is the priority. If you are a registered charity, you're going to have a lot more chances of winning funding at the moment. Without it, CICs, social enterprises, non-registered charities can get money from trusts, but they're not particularly attractive to trusts. Those ones, if that's your main area of activity, you might need to look to other income streams to bolster you. You're also looking for funding that is for identifiable current and future projects and costs. This is not the time to develop new projects for funding announced unless it fits with your strategy really closely, or it helps you right now in this pandemic to deliver your services. If you need suddenly to get an online system because that's the only way you're going to be able to deliver one-to-one with people, a service that before was face-to-face, then that fits as a new project. But if you don't need that, don't go looking for something you don't need and that you can't continue to maintain along the way. And like I said, we've not lost physical infrastructure. From a research point of view, I would say trust fundraising to a certain extent needs to be kept the same way we are doing it. This is a time where you can spend the time doing things that normally you wouldn't have time for. Research is one of those. Because if you're not putting out a lot of applications or a project has stopped for the moment, you can stop putting all of your activities in that and you can concentrate on doing research. If you have the funders, you can make the applications. If you know what your projects are that you need funding for, you know what to look for in your research and you're not going to fall down rabbit holes. So knowing why you need funders is really, really important. What you're looking for is somebody who can give you the size of donation you need. But keep in mind that there's a very small percentage of the roughly 4,000 or more trusts out there that give grants in the UK that actually give grants over £10,000 at a go. There's some very big ones, and a lot of the very big ones are actually concentrating right now on COVID-19 and their current fundees, the people they're currently already supporting. Check the guidelines on those ones. So for example, Garfield Weston or Esme Fairbairn or any of the Sainsbury's trusts. And there's a plethora of other ones out there that are on the top 300 list from the Association of Charitable Foundations. I do have a list of places to go for funding and where you can do some research, and I'll be sending that through to Andreea to you later on this week so that you can post it for everyone.
Yeah, we will share that on KindLink Global tomorrow, together with the article, essentially encompassing the conclusions we've drawn with this webinar. So somewhere around noon tomorrow, you'll get an email with the article and the resources that Deanna will kindly share with us.
Okay. Trust fundraising and research for trust fundraising is all about preparation. So it's very, very much front end loaded. You'll do an awful lot of work at the beginning and you may not see anything for a while. So manage your expectations with that. With research, you need to know what you're looking for and what kinds of things you want funding for, and about how much money, where you can look for it. There are databases out there. There are paid subscription databases out there. And in the list that I've got, I can do that. There's also a bunch of free databases that you can access. Additionally to that, you can get in touch with the charity itself, because a lot of times they'll have a website, and the website actually may have all the current information about whether they've suspended grants for the moment, because their teams themselves and their trustees are actually all volunteers, and they have to figure out how they're going to meet and how they're going to write or read all the applications, in addition to the work that they have to do in their regular jobs, and the 3 kids that they're babysitting at home, or the grandkids that they're not missing, and the fact that they're struggling or potentially are dealing with having COVID-19 themselves, or are self-isolating. So you want to look at the charity itself and its website and any other information that you may already have, your own database and what information you have about those trusts already. There may be some that you already know about. There's also Google and other search engines that are out there. And I'm saying Google, but I do know there's a bunch of other search engines that you can use to try and find things. Type in the name of the charity. You might find some really interesting little gems. They're your local TSI, third sector interface. For example, here I live in Scotland and my local one is CVS Falkirk. There will be local third sector interfaces all around the country, and you can go in and find that out as well. Your local authority will have funding units. They may have community grants or newsletters, and often on their business development or their business pages, and in the various pages they'll have a link for information for funding sources for small businesses. And sometimes on that, they're classing charities, no matter how big or how small, in with businesses. So it's worth having a look for that. They will often have newsletters you can sign up for, and they'll tell you what are the charities in the local area that are sending out, that have a deadline coming up, or any government pots of money that they have to spend before the end of the year, although it's now no longer the end of the year, but they'll have pots of money that, oh, we've got to spend this or the government takes it back, so let's spend it, and they'll send out funding. In one case, with one of the charities that I worked with previously, when I was an employed fundraiser, working for the charity itself, we got one where it was grants up to £4,000 or up to £8,000 for activities to do with autism, and my charity had a whole bunch of autism services. We ended up buying a whole bunch of toys that would last them for about 2 or 3 years, of like fidget toys and all sorts of activities for people who were quite seriously or dealing with quite serious autism levels, who could then, we stocked up just because the opportunity was there. We made a case and we got the funding. So you want to be prepared for having activities like that and really spontaneous funding opportunities. Mm-hmm. With that being the case, you need to know you need to know the activities that you're doing, and you need to know who in your organization you can go to. So you need to do internal relationships with your project managers, with your service deliverers, with the carers on the ground, with the person running a project, because they'll know exactly what they need. And all of a sudden they need like an entire box full of construction paper for crafts for kids, because they have no money for it. And that will mean that they can do that project for the next 6 months. The other thing is colleagues and networks. And I think the other guest this afternoon will be talking, or this morning will be talking a little bit about that. But think about who your colleagues know. Are they trustees of any organizations? Are they involved in anything like the Rotary, or are they involved in the Masons program, or the Masons network and things like that? There are local groups that have local activities and funding that's available. Your own networks. And other organizations' annual reviews and reports are also really good. They'll list sometimes who they got funding from. Just because they got funding from them doesn't mean that you will, but it's a good idea to get a list, and at least you can get that first long list where you can start getting funding in and looking at them. The other one is libraries and directories, journals, local media, and blogs. Now, libraries themselves are closed right now, but a lot of them have online services. If you've got a library card, that's great. As soon as things open up, or if you can get a library card online, get one, because sometimes you need to have that library card membership to be able to access some of the resources. I know that the British Library has access to some things. Some things you have to be able to go in physically to use, but there will be online resources that you can use for that. Same thing for the National Library of Scotland. So it's worth it to find out where all these resources are. Spend half a morning. It's time. It seems like you're faffing about, but it's actually time well spent to go in and take a look at that. The other thing is, like I said, take a look at your previous funders and relationships, including ones that may have lapsed. Get back in touch with them. Now, I wouldn't say, hi, you gave us money 10 years ago. Can you give us money now? We're in emergency, if you've not been in touch with them. But now might be the time to start opening up some relationships and get that on. Keep in mind that you might be needing money now, but you're also going to need money in 6 months. And so some of the things that you're doing now are going to be coming back to you in 6 months. And if you don't start now, it'll be 7 months or 8 months or 9 months. So that's why I'm saying keep going with things. There are subscription databases, and some of the ones, and I'm not qualifying that any of these in one go are good or bad. But Grant Finder by iDocs, it does tend to be expensive. So if you're an organization, they do, however, come in and they'll do a demonstration for you. Depending on your funding needs, they might be a good investment, and I would look at it as an investment. Additionally, there's Factory, and it's spelled Factary. There's Grin, Grin, all in capital letters, and it's an acronym. I can't say.
We'll post that
acronym,
on we'll post that on KindLink Global, Deanna. So don't worry about that. Okay. Everybody will have access to it. There's
Funds Online as well, which is the former trustfundraising.org program. These ones, there are other ones out there, and there's quite a lot of other ones out there. As I said, the list that I'll send through has a list of all the free ones that I could find. And that's public. We've got that published already. So we'll send you the link to make sure that you can link to that.
Yeah.
You want to know how much money you need. Very much. You need to know before you start researching. Do you need £10,000? Do you need £100,000? If you need £100,000 and you can't find funders that will give you £100,000, figure out what is the smallest amount you can look at. Don't discount the ones that give smaller amounts. So if you say the smallest amount that we could really go is 5,000, and a whole bunch of 5,000 grants is what you're looking for. But keep in mind that the ones that are giving 500 might give you 500 for 5 years and then all of a sudden give you 10,000. So it's about researching and getting those relationships going. And I operate with trusts and foundations on every little bit counts. So don't discount them entirely, but keep in mind how much you're asking for. If you've got 90% of your larger amount available or already funded, then going to the smaller ones is fine, because that little bit extra will actually help you reach your goal. If you're going for the little ones at the beginning, they're going to go, I could give you £500, but that's not going to help you right now. You need 90,000 before I can give you 500, because it's not going to have any impact at all. Know exactly what you need the money for, because the guidelines that the funders have, if you know what you need the money for, that will help you get your shortlist. If your application, if what they're funding and what you need are close to each other but not overlapping, then you're probably in the competition that's out there right now, you're probably not going to get the funding. You need to at least overlap their funding, or have ties to their trustees already that are already in place, so that they can, most trusts have discretionary funds outside of their stated guidelines, and you can access it that way. But it's really very much about making sure you meet the guidelines, and that will help you shortlist list. It's better to have a shorter list of really good matches than a longer list of sort of okay matches. It's about managing your time and getting the applications out there, but also about knowing how much time you can put into something. How much research do you need to do? That's a little bit like how long is a piece of string. You could end up spending an entire day researching one funder, and if they don't have very much money for you, or you get lost in a rabbit hole that takes you off into interesting places, especially with our attention spans sort of dissipating a little bit with the current situation, with all of us working from home, or most of us working from home, it's a good idea to make sure that you can get that sorted.
So Deanna, I will interrupt you for 1 second to say hi to Rita, who's just joined. Welcome.
Sorry, I'm late, everyone.
No, don't worry. We're very happy to have you. Deanna, sort of giving us an idea of things to look at when you're preparing to apply for funding, some of the things you have to consider. Deanna, if you could carry on with that, and I'll come back to you, Rita, ask you to present yourself, give us an overview of what's going on and all of that. Is that okay?
Sure. Keep in mind that eliminating a potential funder can be just as valuable as qualifying one, very much so. Having them not in your list means you don't have to worry about them anymore, especially if it's one that everyone's saying, oh, you should go to them. I had one funder who kept saying, you need to go to the Tutor Trust. You need to go to the Tutor Trust. This is going back about 15, 20 years. We didn't match their guidelines, but somewhere in there, they knew that the Tutor Trust had given another charity money. And so in their head, it's, we need to get money from the Tutor Trust. And that was my trustees and the other people in the charity, in the fundraising group. I had to show regularly, I've looked at them, we don't match their guidelines. We can't apply unless you've got a connection in. And I don't know if they did have connection in, but we ended up not applying. So make sure you do eliminate the ones that aren't there. Just to wrap up, I've got 10 quick tips, top tips for doing research. And I'll make sure you do get this. One is research is time and money investment that will most definitely pay off. It's essential for sustainability of your fundraising and organization. And right now it is imperative. Guidelines are changing day by day. People are suspending their grants activity for the moment. There are some trusts that will close, unfortunately, the same way there are going to be some businesses that close. In some ways, you have to look at this very, very coldly and just look at it as this is something that's going to happen, and then move on from there. Dig deep and cast a wide net, and be aware that there are research rabbit holes to avoid. Include reviewing the annual accounts and donor boards from your and other charities, as well as the funders themselves. If there isn't a strategic match, don't waste time applying unless you've been invited to do so. And if there's a general match and you have a prepared cover letter, proposal, or it's a very simple and short application, then it's probably worth the stamp. If you don't ask, you don't get. Equally, if it's none of those things and it's general, that's something you do at the end, once you've got all the other ones covered. Keep your funding priorities clear. If you find potential funders for another project, note them and park them until later when you're dealing with that other project, unless there's a deadline tomorrow and you can do it really quickly. If you can and they allow, contact the funder in advance to clarify any issues or guidelines. It could be the beginning of the relationship. Keep in mind right now that some of the funders are a lot of the funders are actually managed from legal firms or accountancy firms, and so they may not have anyone on board that can answer the questions for you. Do your best. That's, I think, the best thing, is do your best in the situation we've got. If you can't get answers right now, park them until this is over and then approach them then. Look for and find connections between your organizations, your staff, your trustees, and your causes. And I think this is something that Rita is going to be talking about later. Network. Our societies work because of networks. Tap into them and use them. Refresh and renew your research and your data about funders, keeping GDPR in mind. GDPR is going to be very, very important. I think sometimes people are letting things go a little bit right now just because it's all a little bit chaotic, but keep them in mind because it will come back to haunt us. The ICO is very much on top of everything. If not right now, they will be coming and looking backwards at things. Trustees' contact details and guidelines change, so that's why you want to keep researching. keep good records for yourself, for your successor, for your current and future beneficiaries, and also because you want to know what happened during this time period. And then do your own homework, ask for help. But remember, to a certain extent, we're all in this competition with each other, and we have our own research to undertake. So if you say, hi, I've got a small charity doing, providing after school programs to children, I'm pulling this one out of the air, who can fund me? Well, I'm also doing that, but I'm not going to tell you who the funders are that I'm going to, because you're then my competition. So, but what I might do is teach you how to do, I'm not going to give you the fish, I'm going to teach you to fish. Also, your situation and my situation of our charities and our locations may be very, very different. Don't expect someone else, just because you work in a charity, just because you're working from home, don't expect them to do your work for you. They're doing their own work.
Fantastic, fantastic. We have a few questions from the attendees. I'll come back to that. I'll quickly go to Rita now. Rita, if you could quickly introduce yourself, and then I'll have some questions for you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Sorry I was late. My name's Rita Chadha, and I'm CEO of an organisation called the Small Charities Coalition. We have nearly 14,000 members across the UK, and as the name suggests, our focus is on small charities. Originally, we were meant to relaunch the organisation in April with a focus on charities with an income of under 350,000. Conventionally, the definition of a small charity is there's no shared definition, but it's commonly believed to be any organisation with an income of under $1 million. Given the crisis, we feel that this is a particular time for solidarity across the sector. So you've got a sneak preview. We'll be announcing tomorrow that actually we're sticking to the under $1 million target. And 80% of small organisations in the UK, registered charities in the UK, have an income of under 200,000. And it's those that we are particularly concerned about at this critical time.
So I want to talk to you about ambassadors, and on that topic, we've had some wonderful and inspirational story this morning. You might have been watching it. Captain Tom, the almost 100-year-old war veteran, has raised £12 million for the NHS. I was truly heartwarming and incredible to watch. I couldn't keep my eyes off the interview this morning. To talk about an ambassador and a hero. So, you know, with a story like that in mind, what is the ideal ambassador for a charity, and how do you find them?
So I think that we need to, especially for smaller charities, it's really difficult to get that kind of access to the celebrity networks. Some celebrities do charge for their support as well, but it's really difficult to get into those networks of influence where you can. So you've got to use the tools that are easy to hand. And I think social media is absolutely fantastic for that, and especially Twitter. So if you are looking to court somebody and chat them up, then actually starting to introduce yourself kindly on social media is a good introduction. It's also important to look at your trustees as well, and look back historically at your trustees and the annual reports to see who were they connected to as well. In some cases, you know, it's because we haven't asked the question. So a useful exercise that we've often done is we've asked each of our trustees to kind of talk to us and declare, partly to avoid any conflict of interest, but also to declare their professional membership of organisations, any close strategic alliances that they have, either professionally or personally, that they think could benefit the organisation as well. So I think we need to think that that's if you're looking for external ambassadors. But what I would also say is that actually the best ambassadors for any organisation are the people that are your members or your beneficiaries. And it's those voices that are actually more powerful, more that actually appeal, I don't know if Deanna would agree, with funders in most cases as well, because it's that emotion of a story or that emotion of an experience that actually connects with people as well.
Most definitely, most definitely. Cases, having a case study in an application, if there's room for it, can make all the difference. Because then you're talking about somebody real. You're not talking about something that's ephemeral and in the air.
Absolutely. So I think, you know, in terms of beneficiaries as ambassadors, there are a couple of things obviously to be wary of. And one of the key issues is around GDPR, making sure that, you know, when you are asking people to share their story in whatever format, that they are protected. And a particular concern here is around children and young people. So if you've got a vulnerable youngster who shared their story at the age of 13, how are they going to feel when they see that story possibly on social media fed back to them and still associated with their name when they're 21? So, you know, it's important to be mindful of how you present a beneficiary's story. The other key important issue that, and we've seen a lot of organisations fall foul of this, is about making sure that you debrief people after they've shared their story, especially if it's been in a public forum. It can be quite traumatic to share that you've been a survivor of domestic abuse or that you've had faced some trauma. So having that compassion, both when you were supporting the individual, but also when you are then stepping back and asking them to help you, is also critically important as well. And it's that debriefing that I think keeps the goodwill there to a large extent as well.
I think actually that feeds into my next question. How do you tell the right story? There's so much noise out there on social media. There's so many things to think about. Many charities may not have the resources to, for example, create a beautiful video in which they tell their stories right now. So how do you sort of reach that balance between being mindful of all the things that you should, being mindful of your beneficiaries or your ambassadors, but also, you know, getting to the funders, because that is the point. You need money or you need support in order to continue on your journey. So where is that balance? How do you strike it? How do you tell the right story?
I think you've got to be very focused in deciding what your message is. And good storytelling is always about what's the impact? What is it that you want your story to achieve? We could all tell stories from all our organisations day in, day out. But what is it that makes a story resonate in your organisation? And what is the impact that you want it to have? How does it coincide with your main message? And I think when you do some background work and I mean, what we have at the Charities Coalition that we start each week with saying, what are our key messaging targets this week? Often things overrun and circumstances overtake that, but at least we have a baseline there of what is it that we want to communicate and why do we want to communicate it? Is it that we want money? Is it that we want influence? Is it that we want to change strategic thinking? Is it that we want a public culture change? So I think there's be clear on why you're messaging. That'll help you pick the story that you need to tell as well. When you're telling the story, I think, again, it's about thinking slightly backwards, and it's about thinking, what's the medium that I'm going to use here? Is this something that needs a visual component? Is this something that needs a drama element? Is this something that needs a comical element on it? What is it, and what's my end medium? Is it going to be press? Is it going to be television? Obviously, that's harder to get into in some cases, and that helps you identify from the myriad of stories you may have from very different and diverse beneficiary groups exactly who you need to talk about and to whom and at what point.
Fantastic.
I'd echo
Sorry, go
that.
on, Deanna.
Sorry, I'd echo that. Within trust fundraising applications, what I'd say is know what your story is, full stop. And to that extent, in monetary fundraising, we talk about proposals and we talk about cases for support, and they're two very different things, although in general fundraising language, they can often be interchangeable. We look at a case for support as an internal document, and it's a little bit like a Bible for your project or your service or your organization. It's got all of the information, often with, I want to say, camera ready or application ready language, but you would never send it out to your funder. It's got, it talks about, and if you're just doing this and you don't have, there's no one way to do it. But if you're answering who are you, who are your beneficiaries, why are you needed, why do they need this support, what are you doing, what is it that is being achieved, where are you, and where is the activity taking place, I think, did I cover why? Why is the other one? Why is it needed? So who, where, what, when, why, the 5 W's. Onto that, I'd ask how are you doing it? How much is it going to cost, and how many people, or how big is the impact going to be for the people that you're working with? And it's looking at you and looking at your beneficiaries, and where does that overlap happen? If you can get all that down and have in there your budget, have in there all the contact details of people, especially right now, if people are working from home or have alternative contact details, make sure you've got that there. Know who the project person is that's going to be delivering it. In these times right now, I'd also want to know, how are you doing things differently now? How are you going to do things differently in 6 months? And this is why I say said before, don't panic. You need to think about, once this is over, what are you going to go back to and deliver? Because one day there's going to be isolation's over. How do we start? Because tomorrow it's going to be different. So you need to start planning today for how it's going to be different tomorrow. It's a little bit like playing the pension game. You need to start putting money away now for when you retire. Well, we're going to open doors again, and we're going to open services again. Have you found that actually your beneficiaries are preferring to do things online because it helps them better than coming into your resource or your service area and your location, because they don't have the bus fare to get there? So instead, actually doing it online is a better way to do it. So having a case for support, if nothing else you can do, I would say that the single most important thing you can do right now is get that case for support ready, because it means you can take advantage of opportunities like the autism toys grant that I said that I had said about earlier. It's about making sure that you've got that boom. So when someone says, right, there's a new COVID-19 fund that's opened and we fit it exactly, what are we going to do? You have all the information there. It closes at 5 o'clock. They've got it open for 9 hours. You can spend an hour or two filling in the online application form. You've got all the information there. And what you're telling one funder is what you're telling another funder for the same program. They do speak to each other, whether it's right now and possibly online or over the internet or by phone or email. They do it in when things are in a regular, normal, more normal interaction levels as well. So you want to make sure that the story you're telling one person is the same as the same story, although you might retell it slightly differently. So it depends, like as Rita said, what's the message today? There's going to be a consistent underlying program underneath that message, but the focus of that message may change from day to day or throughout the day.
We have a question for both of you. I'll start with Rita. The question is from Jane. She's saying, has anyone unpicked how we get access to the government funds? Can you shed any light on the logistics? How do we apply?
Okay, you're not missing anything because that fund's not in the public domain at the moment. So the funding will come via the lottery, the national lottery. So there's two pots. There's two pots of funding essentially. There's the lottery's standard pot of funding, which they are pivoting towards COVID responses. If you are at stage, we had a discussion last week with the chief exec of the lottery, and the question was asked, what happens if you're at stage 2 of a Reaching Communities application now, pre-COVID, and what happens next? And so what she said was that you should contact the funding officer and have a discussion with them to judge whether you can go to grant committee or not. If you haven't got that, and you're still at the early stages of a pre-COVID lottery application, then you should think about how you can make it COVID responsive. I know that's not going to work for every charity, and we are heavily at the coalition lobbying about the need for recovery and the need for all charities to survive through this as well. But I think that's kind of a different discussion around collaborations, alliances, and even mergers, dare I say. That's going to come later on down the line. But at this stage, that government funding comes in two places. It comes directly from individual government departments, but that will mostly be based around how the larger national charities have a relationship. So, for example, St John's Ambulance will go directly to the Department of Health for its funding. But they will also have a pot for small charities as well. And again, if you're part of membership umbrella bodies, get them to lobby on your behalf with that specialist government department as well. And then the lottery will bring out a specialist pot just for COVID emergency crisis responses as well, which will be the 350 million that was talked about last week. And that's an opportunity. The other funding is also coming through something called the 2.6 Challenge and NET, which is the National Emergencies Trust, both of whom are filtering down to the local level as well. From our point of view, if you want more information on that, it's on our website under COVID resources fundraising, and we're trying to keep people as up to date as soon as we know about those opportunities. Hope that answers, Jane. Sorry, Deanna.
Sorry, I also have a follow-up for Rita, because we have two more questions that tie into what you just said. You know, there's a COVID response funding and everything, but then there's also all the other charities that need to survive. And we have Rebecca and Alan asking, they're essentially charities that aren't necessarily on the front lines dealing with COVID. Rebecca says, I have a charity in which I can't operate as it's an indoor play center. I can't find any support for us while we are closed apart from third sector resilience. And then Alan says, we are an independent village hall registered charity that has closed due to the virus. Looking ahead with overhead costs of £14,000, is there any help out there for us to survive the year ahead? If you could shed some light on that approach, because there's so many other charities out there that need support, don't they?
Absolutely. So yeah, that's a real big concern for us. And I think the answer there is about how do you raise unrestricted funding? And it might be looking at things like KindLink's online crowdfunding platforms, other kinds of platforms that you can quickly mobilize. The 2.6 Challenge, if you're not aware of it, and just Google it and it will come up, is a version, it's the people who organize the London Marathon, and they have come together with the other big event organizers, the big North Run and the others. And on the 26th of April, everybody will be encouraged to engage in fundraising, where you can either get your supporters or your members to raise funds which will be unrestricted for your organization. You don't have to be a COVID response agency to take part in that challenge. So the idea is that on Just Giving and on Virgin Money, you pick one of those platforms, you set up your fundraising page, and that's where your members donate to, just specifically for your charity. There are no charges on any of those platforms at the moment. They're waived for this event. And you will be able to earn, you'll be able to keep all of the money that's raised on your platform. But you also will get a proportion of a central pot that is being shared out as well. So the Charity Aid Foundation is managing the central pot, and then they will divvy out based on the proportion that you've raised in your own organisation. You'll get a share of the central pot based on that as well. So Rebecca and Alan, I feel sorry, I really empathise, and I understand the pain you're feeling, because we're in a similar situation. But I would say your best option is to go for unrestricted funds at this stage. See what you can draw on from your members to keep you coming alive. If you're members of a coalition and it's free membership, we're also announcing a new fundraising opportunity that was meant to be announced in June, which is based around the lottery, a local lottery where you will keep all the proceeds that arise for your organisation. So if you have individuals and beneficiaries, and I recognise this doesn't work for every organisation, but if you have individuals and beneficiaries who regularly apply to the national lottery, this will be an opportunity where 50% of every ticket goes directly back to your organisation, and all the big prizes, and you're guaranteed a win for your organisation. All the prizes are paid for by nationally as well, and it doesn't cost you anything except the licence for your local area to run the lottery.
Because you know, we talked about fundraising. I'd like to remind everyone that we don't charge for fundraising on our platform. We have the COVID-19 response now, but for all the other charities that are not necessarily frontline, have a look at our marketplace. This is something we have throughout the year. We have an opportunities marketplace where charities can come and ask for support from the corporates in our ecosystem. That is free of charge. The platform is free of charge for all charities. So if you need any kind of help from our side, please feel free to give us a shout. Sorry, Deanna, you were about to say something?
Yeah, in Scotland, the government in Scotland has money they're delivering and distributing as well, especially for smaller groups. So if you're an organization, either you are based in Scotland or you have a branch that's in Scotland that's also having issues to do with paying rent and so forth. The SCVO, which is the Scottish Council of Voluntary Organisations, it's like the NCVO but up here in Scotland. They have a list of funders and how the money is being distributed. Because some of the things are devolved, like to do with healthcare and to do with councils, it's being distributed slightly differently up here. The other side of it, though, is I think everywhere, go and see what your council's doing. So some of that government money has gone to councils as well to help reduce rates and reduce some of the aspects on that. There is a couple of websites that have general information out there. So CAF's website, I think, is compiling lists of who's got what funding and on the trust side of stuff. There is a site called the Charity Excellence Network. It's hosted through LinkedIn. It's a bit of a crowd-funded site, so people are just suggesting trusts that have given. It's not necessarily been a vetted site, so you want to make sure that you do your own research from it, but it's a point you can look at. The other side of it is there is a website or a page on Facebook called COVID-19, and there's a dash between 19, Charity Preparedness Group or Charity Preparedness. It's a private group that anyone can join, but it's not being public. It's not a public facing group per se. And there's an awful lot of updates as people are finding out new things. They're posting it up there on a regular basis. It is international. So if you are looking at things from an international point of view, you can see what other countries are doing. You can see what other responses have been and what individual resources are out there. It's probably worth it to just keep an eye. There's also all the other fundraising pages that are on fundraising or Facebook, like fundraising chat and the various major donor groups that are worth monitoring. If you're not a member of them now, it's worth it, even just to keep an eye on what's going on. There are updates that go on regularly on them, and it's fairly good to look at. Other than that, I would say take a really good look. If you're not frontline and you're not necessarily delivering it, remember it's about your beneficiaries. So what is the impact on your beneficiaries of you closing? Are they, even though they're not at risk of getting COVID-19 or coronavirus throughout all of this, is the impact that you're going to close and in 2 months these people are not going to have an after school place and they're going to continue having isolation? So that's what I was saying about your case for support. Pick holes in it. Make sure that you know what all the objections could be and answer those objections. Don't just say, oh, well, because we're great. Well, prove that you're great. You need to be able to prove. Competition is high. People are getting in and there's more money available temporarily, but the competition for it is still high. So you need to argue your case really well. You need to know what are the good things, what are the bad things. You need to follow through on your spelling and make sure that the application you've put through makes lots of sense. I will say, if you're putting in case studies with it and the language is very much what your person has given you, it's a quote exactly, don't change it. Don't change the words that they've put on the page. Don't put it into correct grammar. Don't do anything. Do it exactly the way they've said it, because that's their story and that will have power for you. And make it easy for people to give you funding. Give them all the answers that they want. Don't do if they've given you instructions, follow those instructions to a T. That's really, really important right now, because funders are going to be looking through potentially thousands of applications. You don't want to do really, really tiny fonts. You want to use something that's going to be easier on their eyes. Keep in mind, what questions would you be asking? So it's not just about where the funding is out there, is what kinds of things would you need the money for? And can you fulfill what they're funding? But like I said, there's well over 4,000 trusts charities that give funding. So it's worth taking a look at some of the other smaller ones. Some of them are you can get the applications ready now and get them all ready to go, tweak them and make sure that they're good, and get them ready to send out for the September deadline, when maybe potentially applications are going to come up again. There was a news article yesterday or the day before on BBC saying that pundits and there's an expectation that the market will bounce back up once everybody's back to work in a normal way, because they'll be spending money again in a normal way. We've hit a pause button rather than a stop button. And because of that pause, it's not going to be like the fall that happened in 2008, where a lot of charities lost a lot of money. A lot of charities will have lost investments because the investment is the markets have been hit. But the trust fundraising that's out there right now, most of them will have invested for the long term, not the short term. And so they can afford a little bit of a dip in the markets.
We have about 5 minutes left, so I'll do a quick roundup. You made an interesting point, Deanna. We've hit pause. So to you, Rita, there's time now for maybe charities to rethink their strategies, do the things they didn't have time to do before. What are some of the things that charities should keep in mind and prepare for when everything else restarts?
So I think what you need to think about is that the world will look very different. We may have hit pause, but actually this has led to a major reevaluation of both our macro and our micro systems. So thinking very logically, what are going to be the needs of your beneficiaries post this? What are going to be the needs of your organization? Has working from home turned out to be a better experience than you imagined, than you needed? Do you really need that office 5 days a week? Could you actually share with somebody else now and cut down your overall costs? Is there a different way that you would look at digital services online as well? I know from our purpose, we've always been quite keen to go out and do regional events face to face, but actually being forced to use Zoom has possibly brought us forward quite a bit. Andreea, I'm conscious there's 2 questions on there as well. Can I quickly just answer those as well?
I was going to suggest that we do that in writing and publish it in the magazine tomorrow. I think that might be easier, and it gives us a few minutes to draw our conclusions in the live webinar. No, that makes perfect sense. And this is what I was going to say. Whatever we didn't have time to answer in the webinar, I'll kindly ask our guests to do so in writing, and we will publish it as a separate article in the magazine tomorrow.
Thank you.
Deanna, did you want to add anything to that?
I think it's that the government is not a safety provider. It's a safety net. It's not the provider. So unless you're delivering commission services and that's your sole income source, they aren't the provider of everything. We are charities, and we are designed to receive charitable funding from them. So they can step in as a safety net. If they can do that right now and you can make the match, go ahead. But you need to be thinking about that longer term program. Make sure you've crossed your T's and dotted your I's, and you fulfill the guideline, you meet the guidelines, and you answer the questions that the funder has asked, and you answer the questions that the funder hasn't asked if there's holes, so that you give them a little bit more information than what they were looking for. And then I would say what we're saying from Money Tree is, and it's put your finger up in the air to see what the wind is going. I would say that you need to readjust your expectations, so that if you think before a warm application, which is to somebody you know or has been a previous funder before, you were getting one success out of every 4 asks, I would say now you need to readjust your expectations to maybe 1 in 8 or 1 in 6, and just so that you know there may be less money coming in temporarily, and adjust your targets that way, so that you're not sitting there falling to pieces in your living room because you've just gotten 7 rejection letters. You never know, the next one might be the success. So keep your heads up and keep plugging away at this at trusts and foundations. Don't let it go to the side, because it's not a necessary function.
Well, we have 1 minute left, so I'll quickly read one of the questions for you, Rita. From Harjeet, we organize a local lottery for the vol sector in Reading, where organizations have their own pages. If we connect this to the 26th April event, would this funding qualify for a proportion of the 2.6 million from Charity Aid Foundation, or where can I find out more?
Okay, I can't answer that question because I'm not the organizer, but you can go to the website 266 Challenge, And I'll also make sure I send you the link around afterwards as well. And there's a email address on there called hello@. You can send it to them, but I've also noted this and I will go back and ask the organisers as well. I'm not sure. That's my answer. I'm not sure.
That's absolutely fine. We'll come back to you over email with these questions, Rita. So whatever resources you could help with, that would be amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. We had Deanna Wolf from the Money Tree from Money Tree Fundraising, and we had Rita Chadha from the Small Charities Coalition. We will have the webinar and answers to your questions available on kindlink.global tomorrow. In the meantime, keep safe, and we'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.